Hello, welcome class. This is our first video of several that we're going to be using for our unit over chemistry. We're going to focus the first couple of videos on atomic structure, and we'll talk about what all that is and what to expect in the next few minutes. However, before we get started, make sure that you understand the expectations for this flipped unit. You must watch this video beforehand and then go back, rewatch the video, take notes, and then we'll have an assessment during class. So you have 3 expectations to follow through with during this course of time. What we're going to spend our time about today is atoms. Atoms are these teeny tiny particles that make up all matter. The chair you're sitting in is made up of matter. The piece of paper that you're looking at is made up of matter. The pen you're writing with is made up of matter, and they look like all these teeny tiny speckled parts that create up all the things that we use. Atoms are considered the building blocks of chemistry. Their composition creates all of the matter that we use every day. And what happens is that atoms have certain identities that are created, and they're organized in the periodic table because they're made up of certain parts. There are 3 major parts when we're looking at an atom. They are also known as the subatomic parts, which means that they are tiny parts but play big roles when we're looking at atom identification. The way that I remember this the best is through P-E-N, pen. Our first subatomic part that we have, it starts with a P, and that is our protons. Okay, our second part is our electrons. And the third part is neutrons. And each of these subatomic parts have their own charge, and that helps to create the identity of our piece of paper, or the lead in our pencil, or the carbon that we use when we're making charcoal. All of these things play a certain part so that they can have a certain identity, just like me and you. A proton, the easiest way to remember is pen. So our protons have a positive charge. Our electrons have a negative charge, while our neutrons have a neutral charge. And the way that I remember this is simply that proton starts with a P and positive starts with a P. Neutron starts with a nu, and neutral starts with a neutral. While electrons are just the odd man out, and they're negative. Okay? So your P-E-N coordinates with a positive, negative, or neutral charge. Each subatomic particle has its own place in the structure of an atom. So protons go in a certain place, electrons go in a certain place, and neutrons go in a certain place. In the center of the atom, so the brains of the atom, we have our nucleus. In here, we will see that we have our protons, which I'm going to represent as plus signs, and we also have our neutrons, which I'm going to represent with circles because they're neutral. They're not anything more than that. So remember that the nucleus is created with protons and neutrons. Therefore, we can say that our nucleus is going to have a positive charge. Now that we know that our protons and neutrons are located inside the nucleus, we have to still ask ourselves, what are we doing with these electrons? Electrons are located on the outside of the nucleus in rings known as electron shells or electron rings. I personally like to call them electron shells. And there can be a variety of different electron shells, but for the sake of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be using 4 in our middle school chemistry class. And each of these 4 electron shells or rings can hold a certain amount of electrons in them. The first one can only hold 2 electrons. So I'm just going to represent these with a circle. Okay, the next one, and I'm going to write a 2 right here just so we remember. And the next one can only hold 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm going to write an 8 so remember. The next one can hold 18, and the last one can hold 32. And I personally am silly, so I remember the song 2, 8, 18, 32, which is less of a song and more of a rhythm. So that I can remind myself that only a certain amount of electrons can fit on each. And remember that electrons have a negative charge. So whenever I'm drawing these, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm drawing electrons with negative signs so that I understand that they're negative. And we're going to talk more about why these charges are important later on in our chemistry class. At this point, what I should be able to do is if I'm looking at an element or if my teacher is telling me how many protons, electrons, and neutrons there are for a specific atom, I should be able to classify those and place them in their specific place on a picture of an atom. So if I'm looking and my teacher tells me, okay, your element has 3 protons, 3 electrons, and 4 neutrons, I can go ahead and say, okay, I know that protons are positive, so I'm going to draw 3 positive signs in my nucleus because protons go in the nucleus. Additionally, I should be able to say I know that protons are not alone in the nucleus. They also have neutrons. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my 4 circles for my neutrons. And last but not least, I'm going to look and say, okay, I have 3 electrons. And I know that electrons are on the outside of my nucleus. So I have 1, 2, and I know that the first one can only hold 2. So I'm going to see that I put 2 in my first electron shell, and I'm going to place my third in the second electron shell. And I'm not going to just leave those blanks blank, but I'm going to mark them with a negative sign so that I can note to myself that those are negative. Now I have been talking about how each piece of matter can be categorized as different elements on the periodic table. Each element has a certain number of protons, neutrons, and electrons. So if my teacher told me that I had 3 protons, 3 electrons, and 4 neutrons, I would be able to say, okay, this is lithium. And that's what we're going to be working on in our next video. Make sure that you are noting to yourself that protons are positive, where electrons are negative and neutrons are neutral. In our nucleus, remember that we have protons and neutrons, where in our electron shells, we only have electrons. Make sure that after this video, you grab your notes, you go back and you rewatch, and you get prepared for your assessment tomorrow. Thank you.